What is it like dealing with clients? What is your client relationship? What about expectations? How do you go about prepping a client for the expectations you have versus the expectations they might have, and making sure that you're both on the same page so that you have the most succinct and enjoyable process? And has that shifted from earlier on in your career to now? What are some of the lessons you learned along the way?
Yeah, it's definitely shifted in terms of how I would approach the client relationship. Early on in my career, I was just very appreciative to have a job. So it would be like, sure, I can redesign this and put 100 more people in, even though that's not what I normally do. Or I can make it a completely different color palette because it suits your brand colors and all of this stuff. Um, Whereas nowadays, before the project has even started, I've said most of the time a client nowadays has seen what the work I do, so they have a rough idea of the kind of work they're going to get. But I may want to try something new that they haven't seen before because this opportunity has given me the kind of platform to do so. So I have to kind of let them know, like, hey, there's an initial line work stage. There's room to discuss and change things, but after a certain point, you've just got to let me get on with the work. And there's going to be a small element of discovery when in the coloring of the project or the kind of like finishing of the project that may not be the final sketch that I sent you early on. It may be slight variation. And you should allow for that stuff to happen. Clients should allow for that stuff to happen. It's the same way I always compare to filmmaking, because in filmmaking, you have a script at the beginning and you start shooting that script and things start to change, and you can't treat the script as Bible, because sometimes things might happen with the actors on set where they create something slightly new, or you don't expect something that you pre-planned in the script phase that you then want to put in the film. So that film is quite different to the initial, or a little bit different to the initial concepts that you created at the beginning. So I guess the most recent project would be Green Man. Green Man Festival were looking for a different aesthetic to what they had had before. And that's always a scary thing in an email where they're like, we're looking for something different. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you 100% sure? Because I will give you something very different to what you've had before. And the thing that kept it all in check was that they were like, yes, we want something different, but please can you use our color palette? That way the illustrations can be quite different, but because we're adhering to a color palette that we've adhered to before, it'll be a slow transition for customers of Green Man to be like, oh, this is kind of different to what we've seen before, but it's also something new. And that was the best way to kind of negotiate that project. It's like, I have to then say, okay, I'm letting go of the colors that I normally use, these big, bright, bold colors, but I'm still getting to do something more interesting and new for this client. So I have to let some things go, but maintain some things. And the client has to let some things go and maintain something. So and if
It's
you
a
don't,
healthy
if you're not
compromise.
healthy compromise, like all relationships should be.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't say that stuff up front at the
Yeah.
beginning of a project, it causes problems later. So every project has these things, and the bigger the client, sometimes the more difficult those conversations have to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there is also magic in the improvisation. Like when we create a rough sketch, the color and how it affects the line work can make such a drastic change to the artwork, and ensuring that you've made plain to the client that that possibility, or there's some level of expectation there of that potentially happening, then really ensures that it's quite a smooth transition.
Yeah, I would say so. Sometimes it's very different, though. I mean, I recently did a project for Refugee Week and Counterpoints Arts, and they hired me because I make bright, bold, fun, colorful stuff. and that was their only brief. It was like, just, we got to make sure that it's bright, positive, and bold.
Yeah.
And the way the project was designed was that it was designed with a group of young asylum seekers. So it wasn't
Sure.
just me reading the brief and then coming up with ideas. It was me doing a workshop with young asylum seekers and coming up with ideas and themes and even drawings. I was like, let's draw some stuff out. Let's actually illustrate some things. And it meant that the project, didn't become mine anymore. It became everyone's project.
Sure.
And my way of making it cohesive was to take everything that we gathered and then turn it into one of my drawings.
Sure.
So yeah, you have to be open to new ways of doing things, I think, and new ways of collaboration. I've got a sculpture coming out in September, and it's highly collaborative. There's so many different people involved, and I'm just like, I did my initial sketch, and then I essentially passed it on to so many different people to kind of redevelop. And when it came to the materiality, that developed even further. And if you're not open to those changes, then it can cause some trouble.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is be open and flexible with your style, even though it's an established style, within reason, so that you're not so compromised that it's not recognizable, but at the same time, not so rigid that you can't flex with the work to ensure that the best outcome is retrieved.